The audience expects a straightforward interview, quiet reflections, and perhaps a story or two about a movie in development when Keanu Reeves takes the stage late at night. But something is off right away. The host tries to steer the evening toward laughter, but Keanu isn't following the script. Instead, he's distantly focused. Then his eyes suddenly lock onto something unexpected, a small golden rosary that is silently placed on the table in front of him. At that point, the atmosphere changes, the questions change, and the answers do as well. Otherwise, it's a live revelation, an unspoken confession, and a truth that has been kept hidden for years. By the time the last words are said, the audience isn't applauding. Instead, they are watching Keanu Reeves break years of silence on live TV following a secret. Vatican encounter. What he shares could completely alter our understanding of faith power and prophecy. Oh, and before we go any further, tell us what you love most about Keanu Reeves in the comments section. The studio lights flickered for a moment before the LED glow. On any other night, this would have been just another late-night talk show with casual jokes about celebrities, Hollywood gossip, and behind-the-scenes laughter. However, tonight felt different, and not just because the world was still processing Pope Francis's death. The host's polished smile and charm projected his voice to the room, ladies and gentlemen, and to the thunderous applause of the audience. Some audience members stood up and discreetly raised their phones to record, despite the fact that it was against studio policy. He came in slowly and silently, wearing a black suit without a tie, with his hair a little longer than usual. His expression was polite but distant, and the host held out a hand, which Keanu gently shook. They sat across from one another as planned, with a glass of water, a few cords, and an oddly small golden rosary resting on a cushion of deep blue velvet. The host started to lighten the mood by asking the audience, "What a time, huh? You still look immortal. What's your secret holy water?" The host asked with a forced laugh, "Everything okay?" Keanu took a deep breath and reached out, touching the rosary lightly with his fingertips. His eyes drifted unfocused for a moment as if diving into a long-buried memory. "He told me something that night in Rome," he said at last, his voice calm, but low, almost like he was talking. He saw the rosary and paused. The audience noticed the shift and gradually quieted. "Everything okay?" Keanu was not acting. There was no sign of performance in his face as the host asked him to regain control. He looked at him, but at the same time, he was looking through him what Pope Francis entrusted to me, what he didn't want to die with him. The audience was silent, but perhaps today I need to tell it. The host leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "I was in Florence filming something small, something personal, a European production, and one night at the hotel, a man knocked on my door without saying his name and handed me an envelope sealed with the Vatican's insignia." The audience held their breath, wondering what was inside. Keanu exchanged a nervous look with the crew off camera, but no voice came through the earpiece. Years ago, he started his voice soft but steady, and I received an invitation that didn't feel real. Keanu adjusted in his seat, the rosary still resting on the table in front of him. The host raised his eyebrows in obvious surprise at the invitation, which was personal and handwritten by Pope Francis himself. Keanu stared off into the distance, as though reading the letter again in his mind, which read, "I would like to walk with you in silence among the olive trees." There were no cameras or press, only that the room was still and the tone had changed to one that was almost liturgical and almost sacred. "And you went?" the host asked, barely raising his voice above a whisper. Keanu nodded. "Of course I went. I thought maybe he knew." I was taken by a simple car to a side entrance of the Vatican. The night was cold, and a man senior was waiting for me. We went through a maze of corridors before emerging into a garden where he was waiting for me. Keanu paused again and continued. The Pope appeared exhausted and thin, but his eyes were more alive than anything I've ever seen. Something, or perhaps, he wanted to ask for institutional help, a donation, or something like that. I didn't know, but what I discovered was far beyond that. The audience was completely enthralled with his quiet listening, so he immediately began speaking. He claimed to have seen a video of me visiting a children's hospital anonymously, and he said that gesture of silence spoke louder than any sermon. Then, Keanu took a deep breath before confessing that he felt God had been silent with him for years. His words fell like stone in the studio, and the entire room went cold. He talked about the weight of Peter's chair and the agony of representing something greater than oneself while feeling completely alone. He claimed to have prayed, but the heavens felt silent. Now that he was facing the audience, Keanu's eyes were full of urgency. He told me, "Await faith survives silence, but I'm afraid that one day it might start to mimic it." "What did you say?" the host asked, more subtly than ever, and I just listened. Then he took an envelope out of his pocket, which was sealed with red wax. He said to me, "If I don't see you again, this secret must live cliffhanger." The words rang out like an unseen bell. "Did you open the envelope that evening?" the host asked, tension rising. I kept the envelope hidden for years. It traveled with me through every movie set and hotel room. I never opened it because I told myself it wasn't my place. Keanu shook his head. "No, I kept it for years, but now that he was gone, I don't know if I can stay silent any longer." The studio was so quiet that it seemed like time itself had stopped. Even the usual soft hum of stage equipment seemed to fade. The host sat frozen, barely breathing, and Keanu leaned forward, eyes locked on the small golden rosary. When he heard that he had passed away, something changed. He reached inside his jacket slowly, as if someone were handling something sacred, and took out an envelope. It was yellowed with age, its wax seal still intact, and it was deep crimson and stamped with the papal crest. The audience was subtly tense, like gravity, and Keanu didn't answer when the host asked, "You're going to open it?" Instead, he held the envelope up to the cameras, and without saying anything, he broke the seal. The sound was deliberate but quiet, and as he unfolded the letter, his steady hands began reading to the man. The host turned to face him, and the audience leaned forward as if attracted by a magnet. "The world doesn't need any more saints or gold," Keanu continued, "and it needs men who will carry light through the shadows cast by those who were supposed to protect it." The paper trembled slightly in his hands, but not out of fear, but out of reverence. "I write this with a heart divided between duty and despair for years. I fought behind marble walls. I wore a fisherman's crown while swimming in a sea of secrets." Keanu paused, swallowed, and now if my voice is silenced, I ask you, an outsider untouched by the politics of my world, to carry this truth not to destroy but to preserve a beat. "And at the end of the letter," Keanu said, looking up from the page, "there was something else." He unfolded a second sheet, his eyes narrowing slightly, and his voice dropped. "Hard. There are forces inside this church that I could never cleanse. They wear crosses on their chests but move like wolves. I tried to expose them, but I failed." The audience whispered, almost to a whisper. It was a vision, a prophecy, and the host leaned forward. The Pope wrote. Keanu took a breath and wrote, "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile. He will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void." The host blinked in shock, thinking that Keanu had slowly stated that the collapse of faith would not come from heresy, but from imitation from someone who appeared pure, but brought nothingness. I didn't understand it at all until Keanu added, "But after that letter, everything changed." "What do you mean?" the host asked, and Keanu met his gaze. "I began studying in silence, with faith and power, and I didn't talk to anyone because I wanted to understand what he meant. Then people began to arrive, and Keanu looked straight into the camera. I received anonymous letters warning me not to share what I knew, and he held the second sheet from the envelope in both hands. The weight of the envelope was much heavier than the paper itself. He looked up once more. He read, "The one who will undo me shall not come from within. He will smile, he will dress as a friend, but he will carry the void." A murmur swept through the studio like wind through dry leaves, and the host sat motionless, as if worried that even a breath might break the spell. Keanu folded the letter slowly and steadily. His eyes scanned the studio before turning slightly toward the audience. "This is the first time I've ever read aloud, not to anyone before. Not even the crew behind the camera stood motionless." Put it on the table next to the rosary, because he thought that someone outside the church would rise not as an enemy, but as a mirror empty, gain power by pretending to be good, and then hollow everything out from the inside. The host finally broke the silence because he thought this was already happening. Keanu nodded slowly and told me, "The world's faith is no longer crumbling from truth, it's starving from illusion." The host looked uneasy and then shifted in his seat, possibly hoping that the producer would cut to commercial, but there was no signal, and no one dared to interrupt. He also said that Keanu went on to